After decades of toiling in inadequate facilities with substandard learning materials, construction began on the Carver School for the area's African American children in 1939. Located on 6 acres of land at the corner of Water Street and the 4th Street truck route, the modern $135,000 facility would help put thousands of the region's black children on the highway to success. The dream of Salem-born educator Theron N. Williams became a reality when the doors of this 2-story consolidated school opened for students in grades 1st through 12th in September of 1940, 16 months after the groundbreaking. From that day until its closing in 1966, Carver was more than just a place of learning. Children were mentored, nurtured, disciplined, loved, and inspired from the moment they enrolled. The Carver School also served as the primary gathering place for those in the surrounding black neighborhoods, and through the years created extended families, lasting relationships, and an unbendable fiber that continues to run through the souls of every person who ever taught or learned there. This is the story of the Carver community.
Family. Family is the key word. Carver School, Consolidated School, 1st to the 12th grade, represented the greatest family you could have outside of your own family. The first graders all looked up to the older kids, the kids that were seniors, and our greatest desire was to be like them.
We were a close-knit family there, and we had so much encouragement from our parents first, well, from the Lord first, then from our parents and teachers and the community. It was just a thick community, so to speak, closely knit.
We cried together, we laughed together, we played together, and we got serious together. So those are just things that I'll never forget. And I am so grateful for the love and the education I received through my teachers at G.W. Carver.
Carver was family. Any event that went on at Carver drew people from all parts of Salem, Vinton, Hollins, and all the small communities in Roanoke County where black folks lived. I mean, in many ways, Carver Salem was the glue that kept everything together.
It was just a closeness we had with all of our teachers. They were like our moms away from home. Our men teachers, what few we had, were like our dads away from home. And it was just a closeness there that I don't think any kids anywhere would ever experience that. I really don't.
The Carver family grew larger as the years passed, and additions were added to the school in 1957 and in 1962. At one point, the school had just under 500 students who were managed by one principal, one assistant principal, 24 teachers, 3 custodians, 1 secretary bookkeeper, and just 2 cafeteria workers. With a staff that size, foolishness of any type wasn't tolerated in the halls or the classrooms.
Today, as yesterday, if you don't have discipline, you aren't going to have any kind of program, whether it's English class, math class, science class, it doesn't make any difference. You have to have discipline if you're going to teach anything.
I tried to instill in them that they had potential, and I expected them to work up to it. And I also let it be known I was the only adult in the room, until another one came in. And that I wasn't going to take any foolishness from anybody. And I'm so thankful that my 39 years I taught, I never had a child to be disrespectful and call me out of my name or offer to fight or anything. I tried to show them that I love them. And in return, they reciprocated.
You remember one of the things on television? When so-and-so speaks, everybody listens. And when these teachers spoke, every kid listened. And that's what made them good.
When the children misbehaved in school, I would say to them, "Oh, I'm going to send you to the principal's office. I'll never send a child to the principal's office." They said, "No, no, no, don't send me. You punish me. I'll be good, I'll be good." And I didn't have any trouble out of them. All I'd have to do is say, "I'm going to send you to the office, and you're the first child I've ever sent to the office."
It was the structure, the way you were raised up to respect the elderly and to respect each other. We were taught that you don't put people down, you don't talk about them, you try to help them, build them up, and then in return they do the same for you. We shared. If you didn't do right, you were punished.
My 7th grade teacher, Miss Laura Spurlock, which she made you walk the chalk. And if you didn't do the right thing and get your homework, get math, mostly math, because I think she was a math major, but she used to turn our hands back just like that if you missed a problem, and you get 2 of her licks, you wouldn't get no more. And the next time you get 3, and it went on and up if you missed any more math questions, but she made you learn.
In my house, I didn't have a side. If an adult said something, that was it. That was what happened. And so it was never a consultation with teachers. And anybody could correct me, and the Reverend would finish it when I got home. So that was kind of the rule. And it was with the school, the teachers knew that they had the support of the parents, and that made a difference.
The teachers knew my parents, and we knew that we had better shape up in the school unless we got attended to at home. Plus, one of my teachers was my sister, and that was the most difficult thing that I had to do when she taught me algebra in high school, and I knew I had to straighten up in her classroom.
Being black, if you were a teacher, that was job security. And plus you had respect. People respected educators. I can't say you have that respect now, but it used to be that they respected you, and it was good because it was an extension of your personality to work with those kids.
We thought we had it pretty good, you know. I mean, we had a good time. We had great educators, our parents cared. You had community involvement. You know, you didn't dare do something going down the street because it got home quicker than you got home.
A lot of times you didn't have to say anything. All you did was look. That meant stop, shut up, or whatever you're doing. Hey, I don't want it anymore.
I had a transfer student who came in from New York once, and they used to have basketball games in the afternoon because the children rode the bus, and of course you had to purchase a ticket to go. And this boy said, I don't have a ticket, but I'm going. I said, "You are?" He said, "Yes." So I was standing at the door, and he said, "Well, how are you going to stop me from going?" I said, "You want to find out?" He said, "Yes." I said, the college that I attended required all the women teachers to take jiu-jitsu because it was expected we might meet some bullies like you one day. I said, "So are you going without a ticket?" And the next day, the shop teacher came upstairs and called me out. He said, "Georgia," he said, "what are you telling these kids up here?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, Biff Preston, his name was, said, "Don't mess with that old lady up there." Said, "Man, she knows something." Said she knows jiu-jitsu. Said, "Don't fool with her." And that was quite an experience. And 30 years later, after at reunions, he would always say to me, tell me the truth. Did you really know jiu-jitsu or were you just bluffing? I said, you want to find out?
The teachers here instilled in us a pride and confidence, and they showered us with love, but sometimes it was tough love.
Teachers constantly said, you have to do this and you must do this. And it was not an option. Success was demanded. And I remember Mr. Prentice saying in history class, you all better sit up in here and pay attention. One of these days you're going to get to these places. And we were talking about Egypt, and I said, Mr. Prentice must be out of his mind. We can't even go to Lakeside. How are we going to Egypt? But one day I did make it to Egypt. And I said, Mr. Prentice, I made it. I listened, but I did do, and I paid attention, and I did my assignments. So little words that they said were encouraging to us.
Those students who made up Carver's enrollment and dared to dream along with Harmon weren't just varied in age, but also by hometown. Blacks from as far away as Goodview, Hollins, Benton, Dixie Caverns, and Boone's Mill joined students from Roanoke County communities like Delaney Court, Starkey, Pinkard Court, and Salem.
Many people were bused for miles to Carver to get a high school education. And I happened to be one of those people. I was born in Denton. And I was bused from Denton to Salem for a high school education. Schools were segregated. I passed William Byrd, Lucy Addison, Roanoke Catholic, and Andrew Lewis to get to Carver for a high school education.
We had kids that came from Goodview, drove to Vinton, got on another bus, drove through right past Lucy Addison, all the way to Carver.
Well, it was very interesting, and you got to meet a lot of different people, different personalities.
Actually, the Vinton area and Hollins and Kingstown and areas like that, they came to Carver. And just like in their class, you become friends.
I just remember that in walking to school, which we did have to walk every morning and every afternoon because there were no buses, but I only saw black students going to school at that time. It might be that the white students had rides to school, but we walked. And it was one of the greatest times that we had, just walking and chatting. And when I look back on it, it caused us to be pretty strong when we came to our athletics and pretty healthy as adults.
Some of the kids were farm children, came off of farms and had to do milking and work before they came to school. And those boys that tried to play sports had to work late at night at home trying to finish their work so they could practice with the team the next day.
To watch my friends that lived in the county to have that great love and desire to play for Carver, and at the end of practice had no idea how they were going home, okay? And they were able to go home through hook or crook, any kind of way anybody would take them. Could they catch a bus? And then by the time they got home, it was very, very late at night, and they had to get up the next morning to catch a bus to come back to school.
We had students who came from Goodview, Franklin County line, Montgomery County line, Kingstown, Hollins, Benton, Benton Mountain, Big Hill, all around. And everybody became family, and you helped one another. The older ones looked after the younger ones. Those who rode buses, if they could not go home in the evening, those of us who lived in town, they could come home with us. And many of them continued to do that and almost became literally part of a family.
It truly was an extended family by necessity. The unusually long travel times required to get back home, coupled with a lack of transportation and dining options during segregation, meant that many local homes were full of extra students and sometimes even teachers.
My house always drew people. My two brothers played football. I was in the band. And when, in the 60s, there really wasn't anywhere for kids to eat. There weren't fast food places. And my mom and dad fed every kid, a football player, band members, everybody. They came to our house, they ate. It made my house a part of Carver. And even back when my oldest sister, the girls basketball team, they ate at our house. And if you listen to anybody, they'll always say, yeah, we ate at your house. They stayed at my house. But it being just a couple of houses up the street here, it just meant somewhere for them to go because they were in the county. They had nowhere to really go. They ended up at the Harris house.
There were stops that we made. Joe Harris, you know, Mama Harris and Boo Boo Harris, his parents. I was as welcome at their table as Joe was at our table.
If there was a concert or something at night, they stayed at the house. My brother's teammates, basketball and football, if there was a trip or a late practice, then they stayed at the house, you know. I always thought we had a big house. We have a small house, you know, but that's just what you did. And you were involved. You helped everybody, you know, in church, in school.
During the wintertime when it was real bad, the kids that weren't able to make it home to Bent Mountain, stayed with the families in Salem. And it was just like sisters and brothers. We shared, our parents fed them, took care of them, and then on Sundays, the school bus would come around and pick up the kids and carry them home.
One time we got snowbound here, and the parents weren't worried at all because they knew they were here with me.
I had it a little different because the teachers came home with me. They came to our house. Some spent the night because they may have lived in Bedford and couldn't go back home in the evening. And so sometimes I would say, I just can't get rid of them. They go home with me as well.
This open door policy was both understood and necessary. It also is just one example of how the community as a whole exhibited its amazing resourcefulness and sacrificed for the young black students.
Everybody else was clothed in a band uniform, but we didn't have it. Soon after that, the parents said, well, our boys and girls are going to have some uniforms too. And we started selling coal. During that time, people had coal stores, wood stores. And we made a contract with W.R. Hester, with the coal company, and we'd sell 50-50. So that is how we bought the uniforms for the band. It took 2 years.
I don't ever remember having a book that had all the pages to it, because we always had to wait till Andrew Lewis used books, or we had books from the white schools that had already been used. But to the teacher did not allow us to use that as an excuse. So I would get on the phone and call maybe my friend Bentley and say, what's on page 17? And she would say, I don't have 14. So we would read the page, but we would have to get the assignment done. And the next day we would have our work done. So I think it taught us to be resourceful and creative.
For many years at Carver, I didn't know I had hand-me-downs. The books we had, some had names and drawings in it. I thought everybody's books were that way. And so for a long time, I didn't know that they came from the other schools or we were getting second. I knew our buses were a little bit older because I'd see the other buses, but I never rode the bus. So I didn't know about that. Part of the difficulty we had with the sports equipment is that we often had to buy. The schools had to try to come up with some of that money, and many times parents and community had to try to help. We never had as many basketballs, for example, to shoot around and warm up as many people did.
Those hand-me-downs and limited supplies may have been the norm, but neither put a limit on the expectations. From the top floor of the school to the bottom, excellence was demanded.
Because you're going to go out into a world that you hadn't been exposed to as much, and you're going to be into more of an integrative society, even though at that time you're going to a segregated school. I think the teachers really put a lot into making sure that you gave your best effort, that they gave their best effort to make you the best possible student as you could become.
Even though there was a segregated educational system there was an attention to individual detail in educating each student selectively by the African American teachers that were there in that school.
Now, they pushed us here at Carver to, you know, there was an expectation that you were going to make something of yourself from day one. I mean, that was the way it was. It wasn't, are you going to go to college? Where are you going to go to college? And we heard those messages early, first, second, third grade.
And you would always tell them, you gotta be good, you can't be second best, you gotta be first.
It was the education that was given and the care from the educators. Even though our car was 9 years older than the one down the street, and our books came from down the street, the education was genuine. That each one of us was taught to be the best that you can be, you know. And to continue that process, they always want to know how you were doing. You know, when you come back home, how you doing, what's going on. But the basic foundation for me, education-wise, was here.
If you've ever heard me talk about my upbringing, I talk about Miss Jessie P, because Miss Jessie P she was phenomenal. And the foundation was laid in third grade for me. She'd tell us all the time, good, better, best, never let it rest until the good is better and the better best. Do you understand that, she would say.
There's always someone saying that, or some piece of something that is carried with me in my personal life and my professional life. An example is that my mother was one of the teachers in the school, and she taught business education. And we took typing and business classes from her, this whole generation of us, in the 60s. And little did we know in 1963 or 2 or 4 or 5 that her persistence in making sure that we learned how to type by touch, that we were 2 or 3 steps ahead of whoever our competitors were when keyboards and computers became a common, everyday item in the workforce. We were ahead of everybody. We were sitting there going type, 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 and other people were going peck, 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 cut and peck. And that's Carver High School. That's the prime example.
If it had not been for her, I would not have been able to go to Washington, D.C. and take a typing test on a manual typewriter and typed 60 words a minute. I said, if it had not been for you, there was no way that I could have done that.
To be tenacious and not to give up our lessons in spite of what your physical surroundings and limitations are things that I carried with me going through medical school. That you can never give up. There is never any point where you say, okay, there's not one more thing I can think of. And that tenacity began its instillment at Carver High School.
If the tenacity was ingrained in high school, the social tools needed to demonstrate it were forged much earlier. While Carver offered a great deal to the black community, it did not have a formal kindergarten. That service was provided privately, first on Braxton Avenue and later at the T.N. Williams Center.
I came to Salem in 1948, and Mrs. Smith gave me her furniture, the table and chairs and the blackboard and all of that. And her husband, Reverend C.J. Smith, had made this table and chairs. And I started kindergarten in my home on Braxton Avenue. And then, of course, as it grew, Gertrude Harris came in with me, and her son Jonathan was one of my first kindergarten children. I had 4 at first. And then after the kindergarten grew, we moved downtown.
I was very happy to share my talents
which really was music, and I was a physical education major, so I could do some activities that went with her very quiet, motivating, studious way of teaching the kids.
I meet, my former kindergarten students all the time that tell me that we were instrumental in helping them be successful in life.
Thanks to that good foundation, some strong leadership, a talented, dedicated faculty, and a resourceful community, the Carver Melting Pot quickly became AAA certified in academics, athletics, and the arts.
We had a lovely band. Mr. Wilford Penn was our band leader, and he was good, and the children respected him, and they always look forward to being either in the band or in the choir. And Mrs. Kyle had the choir, and she was excellent too. And the children all loved that Carver choir.
First of all, you had to try out. And you're talking about being nervous. Oh. First of all, I didn't know what I sang. All I know is I like to sing. So when I went in, she said, well, sing me part of the Star Spangled Banner. Oh no, and you only had to sing just a few bars, And she said, well, I think you're alto. So she said, we'll let you know if you made it. So I sang alto for 4 years and enjoyed every minute of it. It was an intense choir. Our choir director didn't take no junk. We had choir competition with other choirs throughout the city and throughout the state, and we always came back. I mean, when the Carver choir stepped on, we were tough. Just tough, immaculate, And our choir director, bless her heart, she's gone on now, but she had it going on. She had it going on.
Sometimes she would call rehearsal at 12 o'clock at lunchtime. And she would say, tenors sing, altos eat, sopranos eat, or tenors sing. And so we would sit in the gym on the bleachers, and some would be eating and some would sing. And then she would put us in 4 corners, a tenor, alto, baritone, and a soprano. And she would say, sing your part. So we would have to know our parts separately before she put us together. So that meant we had to stand alone and know what we were doing before she put us all together, and she would listen for those tones to blend.
For me too, the choir stood out so much. But not only that, even before the children arrived at the high school level, the elementary department was very active in having programs and involving the children and teaching them how to present themselves before the public and the school. And it was just amazing, the things that were taught to them.
Between Mr. Penn, who was the band director, and Brahmi, who was Mrs. Kyle, the choir director, we had an exposure to classical music that included William Tell Overture, themes from an exhibition, the Mikado, Carmen, Bizet's Carmen. We had exposure to all of those things before I even left high school, and you don't even get that in college these days. So for those reasons, Carver High School is definitely ingrained in my soul.
We didn't have an art teacher. I guess each elementary teacher was their own art teacher, but they would make the backdrops for the stage, and it was just a real production.
To me, what stands out is the choir, and of course the basketball and the football, and I was into athletics as much as my kids, so I've always liked athletics.
When it came to sports, Carver took a back seat to absolutely no one. The basketball program was revered not just across the state, but in the South. In the late 40s, Carver won a tri-state championship, beating the best teams from Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Fueled by caring yet disciplined coaches, the teams were consistent contenders, comprised of a number of players who later starred in college.
We looked at the bracket and had Hillside and Durham, and they were North Carolina state champions. And we were run up in the state of Virginia, so our coach asked the people, said, who made this bracket up? He said, how could you pit the North Carolina state champions against us in the first round? I said, 30-some teams are here. And you know, the man said to our coach, said, if your boy from Virginia claim to play ball, you shouldn't be here. And my coach said, we play ball. So, you know, that's how we won the whole thing. The finals really should have been the first round. They tried to knock us out, but we played some solid teams there, but we were the best. But because of the talent, we worked together even during the summer on what we call the Dust Bowl. It was a playground behind the T.M. Williams Center and down at old Roanoke County Training School. That's where we got our skills from. And the guys who went off to play on to college, we played them when they came back for Christmas. And then we played them again during the summer, all during the summer. So we learned a lot from the older fellas, guys who had gone on to higher heights. In fact, one fella, Tex Williams, we call him, Charles Williams, played on the very first team of Carver. And he went on to become the leading scorer in the CIAA tournament just 2 or 3 years later. So it shows the skill that Coach Payne taught. He was a teacher. He taught us how to do this, you know. You don't shoot to miss, you shoot to make it, you know. You don't shoot to hope that you're gonna make it, that's what he used to say. You make sure it goes in there.
We built our reputation on the reputation of the Dow brothers, Smiley Jones, Red Patterson, Pete and Skeet Dow, G.W. Smith. All those guys had blazed the trail, and it was to the point that we couldn't get anybody to scrimmage us. So, you know, we played hard. Coach expected everybody on the team to be able to fill in. There was no such thing as a bench. I mean, you weren't a bench player. You were expected to play. And we had a difficult time. I mean, we're talking about segregated days. We'd have loved to play Andrew Lewis. They wouldn't play us. You know, we had to go as far away as Danville, Charlottesville, places like that.
Basketball was king. And you wanted to be able to play a little bit of basketball for Carver. Every home had a basketball ring somewhere in the backyard.
I had played in the community with the boys off of Water Street, and we call it Cat Hill and Free State. So I was interested in basketball, but I was too young to be on a team. I was in the 7th grade, and because my coach, Martha Sue Cook, thought that I had potential, and my good friend, Jean Chapman, also had potential, then she would get us out of the 7th grade and let us practice with the girls' basketball team until we were eligible. And one of my favorite people to model was my coach. And so they inspired me to want to be a good teacher and to give back. And I did teach for 35 years in Roanoke Valley.
I had the good fortune of seeing the, you know, older boys practice. I'd sit up on the bleachers and watch them. And after I got a little older, I had a goal in my backyard. And I would compete against myself. I'd be this person on this shot. If I miss, it'd be this person. Developing the skills that I would need as I grew older and wanted to be on the team.
We kind of developed a farm system. And that farm system was the guys from the 8th on through the 12th, they more or less trained and helped me to train the guys or the little kids down in elementary school, and they were all there together, you know. And they looked up at the older guys, and I made it clear that you guys in the elementary school, if you don't listen to those fellas that have played for me in the high school part of the school, you're not gonna play up here.
We went to state tournament every year I played, and I could jump, and I could shoot a little bit. But I played with some guys who went on and really did well. I played with William English, two-time All-American at Winston-Salem, holds the CIAA single game scoring record, 77 points. He was the year behind me. I played with Joe Harris and Bobby Wingo and John Meldrum. And these guys, you know, it was a team. You play for Coach Malone, you're part of a team. There is no I in team. He built his success around a couple of things. You're going to be in condition. You are going to be in better shape than anybody. You're going to learn the fundamentals of the game, and you're going to play as a team. And if you do those things, you're going to win a lot of games. And we did.
Well, playing under Coach Malone was a big thing. His car was like a bus. And especially when practice was over, it's about 6 of us from Vinton. When it was over, he would put all 6 of us in his car. And we would carry it to the bus stop, and when we go to games, it'd be 6 or 8 players in his car. The back seat will have 4 on the bottom and 3 on top, and 1 in the front. So it was something else.
We never traveled by bus. We always traveled in cars. We had a couple of the teachers that would get with the principal, Mr. Harmon, and we would all travel by cars. Most of our trips were not overnight trips. So we'd go down to Fieldale, to Gretna, Lynchburg, Christiansburg. So it was distances we could normally travel. But when we went to state championships and those kind of things, we had longer trips. And of course, a little more difficult. But we traveled a little bit, and of course, we stayed in homes because, of course, prior to integration, there weren't places for us to stay that we could afford.
The camaraderie that you had was just tremendous. We didn't have this foolishness that these kids have now. We had strict discipline. We had to practice on Christmas Day. Coach Cannon would say, boys, we're going to practice at 9 o'clock. Well, nobody absent. We were right there, and we practiced at 12 o'clock. Then we left, and whatever we wanted to do then, that was our thing. But we respected him tremendously.
Coach Payne stressed academics first. He was a great teacher. He was a science teacher. We would be riding along on the bus going to a game, and he would ask you, what about the trees right here? What about the process of evolution? How about the water cycle? And the guys would play sleep. He said, I know you're not sleeping. What kind of cow is that? You know, what's the difference between this cow and that cow? So he was always keeping us alert. If you rode in the car with him, he would question you from wherever we were going. Ask what kind of erosion is that? What kind of cow is that? What kind of tree is that? He was a man. He was a tremendous man. Utmost respect for him.
We just had kids coming up through the system, and developed into what I would really call a fantastic program for a small school. We only had 90-some boys in the whole high school and elementary area, 90-some. So we were small. We always said this, we were a small piece of leather, but we were well put together.
Despite all of their successes, their opponents, especially those at friendly rival Addison High School of Roanoke, thought that Carver's teams were comprised mainly of a bunch of country boys.
Where did this little country team come from? Who was Carver from Salem? Well, I was in the stands, I heard them talking about that. I said, you'll hear from them. So you wait till they get on the floor, say, that guy had a team. Some people say, I never heard of Salem. And I said, well, you may not hear, but you're going to hear from them before the night's over. And they used to make fun of us.
Yes, they call us country jack, country boys and everything, and that's how the Addison was.
It was natural for us by the time we got in middle grades. We all knew about Addison and their blue and white against the black and gold. And of course, we had some real outstanding sports participants here. And so it was always a large school against a smaller school. And so Addison had a bigger school, had more to pick from. But we kind of country guys kind of scrapped and sort of stood up to them a little bit.
Carver began its football program in the early 1950s, rarely, if ever, having enough players to even scrimmage full strength in practice. But like basketball, football also would become a force on Water Street.
We didn't have a football team, but all of the teams that we played basketball against had football teams. And lo and behold, in 1952, we were getting our first football team. And all of these teams were waiting on us. And we caught the devil because our biggest rival was our friends to the east, which was the great Addison High School.
We were always in competition with Addison's very fabulous, well-uniformed, well-organized marching band. And, you know, they were just like the ideal. And then along came Carver. You know, the little train they could, had all the heart in the world, but, you know, we just weren't always there in the best uniforms.
And the first game we played against Addison was November of 1952, and they beat us 58-0.
We didn't have enough for a full scrimmage. We never had 24 players at any one season on that team. So you'd scrimmage one half of the line, and you had to imagine the other half. And then we beat Addison my last year in Victory Stadium.
Addison had beat us 2 years in a row, bad. And now last year we played at Addison, we played at Victory Stadium. Okay, we was beating them. Well, so Malone called timeout with about a minute left in the game and told us, when the game is over, get to the bus as fast as you can because we don't want no problem. Well, the game was over and about 2 of our players didn't get to the bus in time. So there was a big fight and the police had to escort them to the bus. Some things like that you never forget.
Forgetting Carver's 3 principals, T.N. Williams, Rush Anderson, and Chauncey Harmon, also is impossible. These men dared to dream, and in the end, helped produce students who defied the odds.
In my class and the class before me, the class of 63, I graduated in 64, so the class of 63, 64, and 65, I'm aware that there are 6 medical doctors. I know of at least 4 PhDs, people who've written books, done magnificent things, military officers. I mean, I'm talking about on up through the ranks.
It makes me feel good. I say, well, maybe what little bit of raw material that I taught them didn't go in vain. It's helped them some. And many of them have done well, too, and I'm proud of them, all over the country. Many of them have done very well. Teachers, doctors, lawyers, and everything else.
They taught us to be the whole person. We didn't have academic skills as somebody else did, just use what we had and use it to the best of our ability. We were also taught to share, always help somebody. So it was that solidarity that Carver had. We would work together. We were taught how to save. I remember one instance during World War II. We used to buy United States savings stamps every Friday. Somebody would come down from the bank, and they were only a dime. So we had a book we could paste them in. Then I think if you filled the book, it was worth $18.75, which you could apply to a $25 bond. So I saved about 3 of them, I remember that much. So we were taught thriftiness as well. We did that every Friday morning.
Just about everything you can think of. We had our version, and sometimes it was smaller. But it helped prepare because when I went off to school, finally left to go to college, there were very few things that at least I hadn't been exposed to in our small school and its environment.
I had 2 teachers that taught me, and eventually later on in life I became their principals. They came and they said, I never thought the day would come that you'd be my principal. I said, well, y'all taught me well.
What was instilled in us was a desire for learning and being successful because our teachers understood how difficult it was.
They had good teachers, excellent role models, and for the most part, a peaceful community in Salem during the years of segregation when the Carver School was open.
The area that I grew up on is called Government Hill. And in order to get to Carver, we had to go through, quote, White Salem. But it was no problem because all of our family, our church, Everything was basically downtown. And out this way, we were all one. And people that lived further out, a place called Free State, which is right out Craig Avenue area, we would all merge down to Carver.
We'd stop up across from First Baptist Church, the old First Baptist Church, where Gardner Smith's dad was the pastor. And there was a fish market. You stop in there and get a hot dog, cost you 15 cents, best hot dogs I've ever had in my life. And next door was a pool room run by a guy named Jay Bird, and he welcomed all the kids in there. So you'd make those stops. Then we'd stop at T.N. Williams Center, and if it was, the weather was nice enough, you played some basketball over there on the Dust Bowl. And you'd make a stop at Brooksburg, because Brooksburg, those two pharmacists, they welcomed us to come in and get a snow cone, get a soda. They were the kindest people in town.
We loved Mr. Bird, and Mr. Bird was good to us. My dad had a prescription there, and we could run his medication on the tab and pay it at the end of the month. And I could always charge a 10-cent snow cone as I got his medication. But I never could sit down on the stool. And that was not by Mr. Bird's rule, that was by the system. And clearly we knew we were in a segregated area because the signs told us.
I lived on Mount Vernon Avenue, and I had to come down Broad Street, cross Main Street, into what we called then Water Street, now South Broad. There was a gentleman on the corner. He used to work for some store, and I know he used to. They used to give him pencils with his business on it, and he would call us over and give us pencils and things. Then we'd go down the street. There was one man named, I never get his name. His name was Mr. Bob Jackson. Every day he would be out there in front of his house and grab us and hug us and things like that. And just the people, it was just almost like a family of people. People, they were so close and things like that. And I think we all had they had the same aspiration, the parents back in those days. They wanted the kids to get an education.
My parents drew boundaries for me. So I knew that I had no business on Main Street. I had no business on Main Street after dark. And so I hardly went on Main Street except for those student jobs, and didn't go after dark. And I was in the community where I belonged. But generally speaking, people in Salem have always been, I found, very kind and warm people.
Even the white citizens in Salem knew who you were, called you by name, and they would say, I know your mama and your daddy. Now, what's hidden in that message is we expect you, and then you fill in the blank. We expect you to behave properly. We expect you to be in school. We expect you to learn. They'd ask you, where are you going to school, boy? There was a caring that in some ways was a result of segregation, because you had to stick together and be together because you couldn't count on anybody else. You thought, at least. And that's the way it was.
And you had the whole 12 grades there, so you sort of looked up to the people that you knew were going someplace, the upper class people, and the upper class people didn't look down on the younger ones either. And it was a nice, warm feeling. I had the good fortune to go there my first 5 years in school, and I wouldn't have traded it, even though separate but equal was not quite the way it was. I can tell you, we had we had 50 in a classroom one time. 50 in a classroom one time. So, but you did what you could you worked with what you had, and you weren't necessarily happy with it, but this is what you had, and it wasn't going to keep anybody from learning and getting better.
Segregation pulled us together, and school was a main place for us to be. It was a safe place for us to be. I often said it was the worst of times, but the best of times. And it was not an easy time.
In 1966, when integration hit Salem and Roanoke County, that safe and secure education would change. The Carver Consolidated School, as it had been known since 1939, closed. The students who had come together from all parts of the county to form these teams, classes, ensembles, and groups were now scattered like seeds into previously all-white schools in the valley. They soon discovered that integration was far from perfect.
In 1955, I was carrying newspapers, the Norfolk Journal and Guide, a weekly black paper. And I remember the headlines, school segregation unconstitutional. And a bunch of us were talking to old man said, we're going to Andrew Lewis. Well, that was in 55. I graduated in 58, and I guess it was 66 before things changed.
Integration is fine, I don't have a problem with it, but you increase and decrease some things. For an example, at Carver, we had all of the kids involved with the yearbook. At Carver, we had all the kids involved with the choir. You had more involvement from the blacks in all of the programs.
I hear people saying, well, integration is the worst thing that ever happened. I don't agree with that. I do agree that what we had at Carver and what other black schools had, we don't have now.
The cultural part was missing with integration for the masses. Now, the exceptional ones always going to excel. They don't lose, it's losing. But the masses lost.
Things were a lot different in the beginning because it was an integrated school. And Glenville was predominantly white, whereas Andrew Lewis had more blacks than Glenville did. But we got along together. And we knew that we were there to learn. And you know, we had the structure from Carver, and we knew how to behave.
When I went to Andrew Lewis, which Maxine's my best friend, she went to Glenville. So we were separated. We'd been together since way before school, we started school. And we, you know, went to different high schools then. But it was quite different in trying to adjust to being about blacks and white together.
You knew it was coming, and you felt that it was the best because you're going to interact with more society than just a segregated society. So that made sense, and I'm glad that it went that way. Although you do lose a little bit of that community feeling. There are things that you're exposed to that you hadn't been exposed to before, but it's going to happen. There are going to be some teething pains.
In our community, we were self-sustaining. We had our own little restaurants, and we had little dab joints, and we had hot dog stands and fish markets and barber shops and all those things. And there were places we went. And those things, now they're all gone. They've disappeared. The togetherness I talked about, my parents correcting me or anyone being able to correct me, that was because in the community, that was the rule of the game. That has disappeared.
The things that we had here were thrown away. And it was like our history no longer was important because we were scrapped to go other places. Our materials that we had a trophy case out here that everybody pried, and we had pictures on the wall of all the graduating classes. All of those things were taken down and moved to T.N. Williams Center. And after a while, things were moved from the center to the curb.
The spring concert and the Christmas concert, everybody looked forward to that. And the sisters would put on their Sunday go-to meetings, and everybody would be dressed to the nines and come to Carver's recitals. And at Cave Spring, at Christmas time for their Christmas recital, I went switching over there dressed up, and here these people were in, well, there weren't many people there for one thing, and you know, in jeans and just casual stuff. And it was such a let down because that was a big thing at Carver, because the parents, you had to get there early to get a seat.
I think parents were a little reluctant, or I don't know what it was, but I always tried to encourage them and tell them if the children became involved that they could participate and be active.
While there are greater opportunities, You don't have the encouraging, inspiring messages from everybody. See, here at Carver, it was from everybody.
The children going to Northside and going to Andrew Lewis and those schools like that, then our children didn't feel comfortable, a lot of them, and they just wouldn't get in anything. No, they just stayed aloof, more or less, and in little groups to themselves. Yes, so it wasn't as comfortable as it was when they were all together as one group.
Harmon taught at the school, was the wife of the principal, and watched both of her children get educated there. She also had the most direct and personal connection to the school's namesake. Both she and her husband had G.W. Carver as a teacher during their time at Tuskegee Institute.
In Pulaski, the furthest we went was the 9th grade. And so when you finished the 9th grade, you had to go somewhere where there was a boarding school. And then that's why I went to Tuskegee. I went there in 1930 and finished in 32. And he was a good teacher, and he knew something about a little bit of everything. He showed us how to take plants and take like beets. He said, now, if you want a nice pretty pink scarf, you don't have to go buy no dye. You can just take you some beets and boil them and get the red color from the beets and tint it. And we could do a lot of things listening to Dr. Carver. And he could play the piano, cook, do a lot of things. But we didn't know he was important.
She got the best education around, and she imparted that. If she didn't tell you, then you felt it somehow, or you learned it through osmosis, and she imparted that to her students, and it's something we'll always remember and always cherish. I didn't realize the total impact that Mrs. Harmon had with education in Southwest Virginia. Not only was she part of getting equity and pay among African American teachers and white teachers. Back in the day, black teachers might make $55 or $60 a month, whereas their white counterparts would make $120 a month. Well, she was behind that in Southwest Virginia, Pulaski County, and Wythe County as far as getting equity in pay, not only from black and white, but from rural to more urban settings.
Yeah, I had Billy Sanford as a student. I think he was about one of the smartest children I've ever taught. He could take a column of numbers and run down that column and add it just in a second. And a lot of times I'd give him the teacher's register and say, just add this column up and see if it's correct. And he'd run that column down, and sometimes he'd say, yeah, it's all right, it's okay.
I was fortunate enough to have a little smarts in math at the time. My father had bought me a sort of multiplication table book and showed me how to do it. For some other reason, I picked it up very quickly. And I was able to perform at 5th grade level math in the 1st grade. So occasionally they would send me up, and Mrs. Harmon was happy. Of course, it made her feel good to have a 1st grader and a 2nd grader going to the 5th grade and doing math problems. Except one time I went up and I missed a problem. And the whole point was to have this younger kid go up and show the 5th graders what to do, and I didn't get any more callbacks after that.
While many of the most influential and revered figures in the history of Carver School, including Lucy Harmon, have now passed away, the memories remain alive and are rekindled every other year when graduates and attendees gather back at the school for an all-classes reunion weekend.
I want to come back to Carver, not as a teacher, not as an administrator, as a student. It's wonderful. I love Carver. It's the feeling here that I still have after 50 years. I still want to come and start at the 1st grade and do it all over again.
We all come together as a family. And this reunion, it's just so much joy in it. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of it.
I hadn't been to a reunion in about 10 years. And so that's how I got the coin. I had the coin made. And we started talking about it, and I said, I'll tell you what, you guys pay for half and I'll pay for half. And then I'll try to get my class to pay for the second half, so that it's a fundraiser for the Reunion Association, just to keep it going, but also that it's a part of our heritage, in that a lot of the things that are on that coin have to do with who we are and where we are as far as our educational background.
At the last reunion, it was just a great feeling. I stood there and had the chance to look out in the audience. And I'm seeing people from 1940 all the way through 66, all sitting there, and some didn't graduate. They went someplace else to finish or other things, but many did graduate. Some stayed in the valley, some went away. But it's just, it's a large family that can't be destroyed. And when you pull us together, almost immediately that common thread of Carver pulls us together.
When the Carver Consolidated School closed in 1966, the name of the school was changed to Salem Intermediate at the onset of integration to handle a number of 7th and 8th grade students from Andrew Lewis, Broad Street, Carver, and Conehurst schools. Thanks to the efforts of that Carver community, the name was restored in 1977, and the school was renamed G.W. Carver Elementary. In 1997, an extensive renovation project at the school was completed, and today, Carver School remains the most cherished African American landmark in Salem.
We fought hard to save Carver School, and it's just, I think, a lot of pride in knowing that this organization has stayed together and fought for this school, because we had to do it twice. And it's just something to be proud of.
Many people didn't understand what Carver meant because it was a new Carver. My dad was out of town at the time, and he got the call, the name is off the building. So he came back from a class at University of Virginia, and we started action to get the name put back on, because Dr. Carver was not just a black man. Dr. Carver was a man who had made it through hard times, but he was a historical man. And the name was important to us. So the Carver Reunion Association formed and petitioned and got the name back. So that was a part of history, to keep that history alive and to keep Carver on this corner. Because this is a landmark, and we don't have too many African American landmarks left in Salem.
The thing about it, you want peace and joy. And that is, look like they don't enjoy that anymore. I enjoyed peace myself, and all the rest of us did. And we were just like one big family. One big family. Carver School was a family, and that was it.